Je pense que nous pouvons commencer. Je vais...
Well, I guess we can start. So I'll start by speaking less loudly in the mic. So we're delighted to host this conference at IEE in Lille for more than 30 years. This institution has been training company and business executives. And of course, we are very much interested in teaching them, explaining them the role they need to play in their organizations, that they have economic responsibility, but also environmental responsibility. They need to be open to the world, to our world. Our students come from various horizons, and tonight we're going to talk about diversity. So they all come from different French regions, from foreign countries. We have students at all levels in education, so they share experience. They come from different social backgrounds, and we have quite a few having support from the government to make their studies. So this topic about diversity is something that we've been implementing here for quite a few years. So we are delighted to have you here. And given the very high quality of our speakers, I'm absolutely convinced that all these exchanges, the ideas that will emerge and circulate, will also be of a huge quality. So I wish you all a very nice evening here in our business school. Thank you. Well, hello. I'm Barbara Leviel, and I'm in charge of diversity, inclusion, and social inclusion for BNP Paribas. I'm not here as a speaker. I'll be moderating this roundtable, but of course, at the end of the roundtable, I'll take a while to tell you about our policies at BNP Paribas. I want to apologize our third speaker, who was founder of a startup, Slate Cube. You're all invited to go and check out this startup company on the internet, but he had a visa problem. So we have two outstanding guests tonight. First, Pierre. Oh, by the way, I'll be moderating the roundtable in French, but I'll speak English to Matthias, and Matthias is going to speak English. So for those of you who can't speak English fluently, please use headsets. So Pierre Messel, tell us, you are the co-founder of Team Je Lequin. You will tell us what the objective of Team Jo Lequin and Matthias.
The ambassador in Germany and also co-founder of Specialistern for Germany. So maybe we are going to begin with you. The foundation, the objective of the Specialistern Foundation is to work to enable 1 million jobs for people with autism spectrum and other challenges maybe. So can you tell us the vision and the mission of this foundation?
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Yeah, excuse me, please. My French is pretty poor or too poor to present it here, so we have this lovely translator that will translate to a perfect French. Yeah, Specialisterne translates to the specialists. It's Danish for the first, so the ones who speak Danish here may pick that up. Specialists was founded in 2004 in Denmark by Torkild Sonne and is a quite innovative social enterprise with a goal, as mentioned, to bring people from the autism spectrum to work. Why that? Most of them, unfortunately, are unemployed or not in decent jobs, what they would be capable of to do. They often have a good education, but then once it comes to the labor market, it's going to be difficult. So our vision is to have an equal opportunity for everybody to join the first labor market, which doesn't start with autism. We still have not equal opportunities even with gender. So autism is definitely a small part of this topic, but it's an important part. Our mission is, first of all, to bring these people to work, to educate them, to train them, but to train the companies as well to deal with this kind of people. Plus sharing our experiences that we gather once we do investments with them, and that is the third part, assess them in terms of what are they capable to do, mainly, and we work mainly in the IT area, whatever is related to IT, from testing to developing to whatever.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Pierre, est-ce que tu peux expliquer le concept très original?
Pierre, can you tell us about what Geologia is about before we start talking about diversity and performance? Well, Geologia is a non-profit organization that we set up in 2012. Our purpose is to promote the link between diversity and performance. So that's right at the heart of what we're going to talk about tonight. And we want to promote this through concrete cases. And we said, okay, we need to demonstrate this performance, to make it seen that there is a real connection between diversity and performance. So what did we do? We took a concrete case example. It's a sailing boat, 20 meters long, so one of the biggest you can have with a single hull. And on board this sailing boat, the crew is not a crew of French, of British seafarers, you know, the big guys who've been sailing since they were like 2 days old. But we have a crew that represents diversity, whether it be gender diversity, age diversity, cultural diversity, ability diversity, and they sign on for major sailing races, and we measure the performance with those of standard crews on standard sailing boats. So you see what the challenge is about. Once we've, so we'll see later if it works or not, but once we've demonstrated what we wanted to demonstrate, what do we do with the lessons we learn? The objective is not to keep this example on sea, because we're not trying to convince dolphins. The objective is to convince the public at large, and using this kind of exemplary case study, people can make this story as part of their own, and they're willing to listen about performance and diversity through an adventure, something which is quite sexy, actually, and not just through problems and issues, which are a bit boring. So we want to embark the public at large towards this united vision of diversity, all kinds of diversity. And the last objective we have is obviously to reach out for companies. If we have this crew out there at sea with performance objectives, having to cope with significant constraints, you know, these crews are just like mini corporations, and they have budgets ranging from 500,000 euros to 4-5 million euros each year. So how can we duplicate practices on board the ship? How can we duplicate this to companies? If we can work with diversity on a ship, can't we do the same thing in a company? Okay, thank you. So we've got two very interesting examples here that can demonstrate why diversity can be a strength and can help out for performance in companies. So we've divided this roundtable according to 3 major topics that we'll talk about in order. So we'll talk about recruitment first, how it happens, how we introduce diversity, how we can be successful in recruiting people, then inclusion after recruitment, inclusion in the company to make the company project successful, and then we'll talk about the benefit for the company to have a positive inclusion of a whole diversity of profiles, and we'll focus on diversity and autism. And once again, we are talking about a specific form of autism, what we in France, we would call Asperger syndrome. We're not talking about all types of autism. It's very important to be very specific about it.
Matthias, if we speak about recruitment, as we know that companies can be frightened, they need to be sure about the competencies of the applicants. So maybe when we ask a company to recruit a person, autistic person, what is the specificity of the recruitment process?
Well, the regular recruiting process would not apply on a person with autism, and as you mentioned, we will talk about the higher end of the autism spectrum called Asperger syndrome or the high functioning. Imagine these people usually quite at least average in intellectual capabilities, if not even higher. So IQ-wise, usually 120 plus, which does not mean they are geniuses by themselves.
But some are.
Some definitely are, yeah. But not all are geniuses. But they do have. They are lacking on social competencies. And I've been manager in bank area and IBM, and I had to employ a lot of people, and unfortunately to let off some as well. But if you hire a person, have the first talk, you see the person and something happens, and then you need another hour or two to argue why or why not you would hire this person. This doesn't work with people from the spectrum. They will, for the first, not apply for a advertisement for a job that would not fit 100%, which, by the way, is the same for women. That you have to take respect of. So if you want to address these people, you have to put different prepositions in your application. The second is the classical phone interview would not work with most of them, because they cannot predict what questions will they be there, and they're going to have major problems to pass that phone interview. Imagine they will pass the interview. Then it appears to come to the personal interview. And then the person enters the room and has problems having eye contact, for example, which, if you are not aware of as an interviewer, will confuse you completely. And then something happens where you then start your process why this person will not match in the company. So what we do is, first of all, sorry.
The microphone closer.
Closer. Okay, sorry. What we do is really to work together with HR in terms of putting the right job descriptions in place, and then go for some special hints. For example, we had one guy who regular application, but he wrote, in my spare time, free time back home, I fill in databases out from the teletext which is prompted on the screen. And that is interesting because that is something he really goes for, that is something he is interested in, that can be used in a job role later in the company. So there are special way you have to read the application in terms to find the interesting points that may be interesting for your company. So a regular application will probably not pass through a standard process where some clerk is sitting and just hooking off check, 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 check.
Maybe we can watch your little movie to understand the necessity to adapt the recruitment process.
Okay.
Je fais juste un petit point par rapport
I'm just saying a few words about BNP Paribas because we are currently going through a process in order to work with consultants who suffer this Asperger syndrome, and we initiated recent interviews. And it's quite impressive because beyond the specificities of autism, you find that these guys have outstanding expertise and you come across a few geniuses. And it's a rare opportunity as a person in charge of hiring. And this is when you realize that they have an expertise you can't find easily on the market. Like they're perfectionists, for instance. They have no bias in their judgment. And at the moment, this is something which is very relevant for data analysis, algorithms, etc. So it's very impressive, very useful indeed. And it's in this very population that we can find these skills, these talents that are not available out on the market. And that's a totally different mindset, especially in HR. So over to Pierre and Timjo Lokia. So just the same, you wanted to get a diverse crew and a crew based on competence, and you wanted a non-biased recruitment process so that we do not judge the person with the biases that we've all integrated, digested since we were kids, because we've been bombarded with stereotypes in society. So it's very difficult not to be biased. Even though you think you're not biased, you are. So you have a method. You've developed a method in order to unbias recruitment, and it's the surprise you get in your crew. Absolutely. That's the challenge. If we try not to discriminate, and that's only going to be an attempt because we can't get rid of all stereotypes. Don't dream, it's just impossible. But we try and recruit without prejudice, without discrimination, and we try and prove that diversity contributes to performance. So, of course, in the beginning, we asked ourselves whether we'd achieve diversity. So the first question is about recruitment. Just by asking the question, that we realized that the major focus has to be on recruitment. How did we do that? In order to avoid discrimination as far as possible, we defined 3 major criteria. And for these 3 major criteria, we have different assessors. So it's not just one interviewer or assessor looking at all the expertise of the applicant. And for each competency, you have two different assessors assessing in two different situations. Why? Well, in order to reduce the bias. And second, you know that a competence, a skill has to be assessed in a situation, always. So an applicant arrives at time T, and he can be good, perform good, not good, because he's stressed or not stressed, because he has family issues or not. So we try and have two different moments with two different assessors, and then we have a scoring. And we do this process for the three key competencies. That's the first way we came up with in order to eliminate most of the bias. So that's our first lever. And the second, well, each of the assessors has taken many courses and trainings on stereotypes and bias in order to get rid of their stereotypes and bias. And it takes work. And I think the first thing a recruiter needs to be aware of is that he has bias. He is biased. Someone who'd tell you, I'm not biased, that's impossible. So you need to accept it. Okay, I am biased, and then you can work on these biases. And this is something that we do with each and every recruiter that we work with. Then another criteria has to do with seafaring, obviously. So we have job descriptions, and we can include applicants at all levels, from experts to beginners. And we chose a large ship because you can accept beginners on a large ship. They can have no expertise whatsoever in sailing, but they have to be physically able. The other competencies, two other competencies are important: an ability to run the extra mile, and an ability or a desire, or both, to work in a team. And there's something very funny or very strange when you focus on the three competencies, and mostly the two last ones. Of course, you get candidates who are looking for performance, but collective performance. But what strikes me is that applicants, one concrete example, we have them take physical tests, and we say, okay, part is the assessment of how fit you are, but there are different positions on board, and even if you're not that strong, it doesn't mean you won't be selected. But we are assessing you in your ability to run the extra mile when performing the exercise. So, holding up 5 more seconds, for instance. Once you explain this to applicants, you have applicants, when they are actually doing the test, they stop and they tell us, I'm at my maximum capacity. I'm not stronger than that. And you won't select me because I'm not strong. And they don't understand that there is a gap here, and they have to run the extra mile, so to speak. So these two criteria, ability to run the extra mile and ability to work together as a team, are two key criteria that maybe we should be looking for in our teams. So just a comment. For us at BNP Paribas, we've set up, if one day you ever come and take an interview at BNP Paribas, we have what we call structured interviews, which are quite destabilizing because we use different methods. And for each job profile, we've defined a set of competencies. And for each of these competencies, we ask the same questions to all applicants. So they get the same questions. Sometimes we change the questions, but all applicants get the same questions. So we're not in an interview. We're not in a conversation. There is no improv in the interviews. So it's quite destabilizing. Sometimes you might feel it's very cold. But this is the only way to remove as much bias as possible from the recruiter and to avoid self-inflicted stereotypes from the candidates. And our scoring matrix is shared by all recruiters. So these new methods are methods that can be used in companies. And if I may, I'd like to add to what Barbara just said, because you see that we end up with a recruitment with 7 assessors, 7 processes, and we don't say anything to candidates. We just look at them on one expertise, on one competency. And very often people come and say, what on earth is this recruitment process? People who pretend that they're working on diversity and they behave like this? What the heck? But the question is, did we achieve a diverse crew at the end of the day? Well, trust me, in the beginning we were not all that, all that proud because we were scared of what we'd achieved, but we did recruit at a certain level of diversity, and this level of diversity was the exact reflection of those population that received our recruitment announcement. So it went up 1 level. So the question is now, if we want to recruit, who is aware of your job offer or of your crew member offer? And this leads us to other issues which have to do with training, why some people would have limits and why many women won't go for having an engineering career. Okay, so we talked about the issues linked to recruitment, so let's talk about inclusion, including people
So
in the
Matthias,
company.
it is not sufficient to recruit diverse, and we have to leverage on diversity, and to do that we need to propose an inclusive workplace. And to do so, how do you define and what are the key success factors for autistic persons when they are in the company environment, when they are in their workplace, how we can guarantee that they are going to do the best, to give the best to the company?
Yeah, quite easy. What would be the best? What would be the best situation? I have the French now. Sorry. Start over. What would make you outperform in a job situation? Probably your dream job, the tasks you ever dreamt of that you want to do. So that is one of the key success factors to identify, especially for people from the spectrum, what are their main capabilities, their strength within their range of autism. For example, being pedantic, we saw before. Yeah, being pedantic would be a strong indicator for a good software tester. We, as we are called neurotypical, say, okay, 100 test cases, 95 successful, forget about the rest. Yeah? People from the spectrum would definitely go for the 100 or even more. They would make up their own test cases after they finished the 100. So matching their competencies, their ideas, their strong belief in what they are capable to do to the task is guaranteed a success factor. It's less about noise reduction, light reduction, etc. Some of them have issues on that, but that usually can be handled, and you can wear Mickey Mouse or headsets or whatever. So these are simple factors. The second key issue really is to bring awareness into the team. So we openly deal with the autism. We learn about the traits the person brings along, and we train the team, the company, the colleagues, the future colleagues, in terms of what to expect, what is feasible, what would you, how to deal with that person. And we sell that as an intercultural competence. Because if you want to do business with Japanese, with Chinese, with Indian, with whatever culture, you have to know at least their rules or follow their rules to be able to make business. The same with people from the spectrum. They have their own rules, and once you understand the rules, you can follow them, you can make deals, you can make arrangements. And that really is key, and it's just a half-day training for a start. What we definitely then recommend is kind of a supervision on a regular basis for both the person from the spectrum as well as the team, because there will be incidences of misunderstanding, of conflicts that can be solved, that can be talked about, and can be get rid of. So these are I think the key factors for successful working or inclusion.
Okay, thank you. Donc on a vu avec Mathias que pour intégrer.
Okay, so with Matthias, we saw that there are specific requirements for the environment to be beneficial and for this difference to become a source of performance. For Team Jolokia, we know that team spirit is ever so important on a boat if you want to win a race. So if you manage to recruit in a very diverse way, and if each time it's going to be a surprise because you don't know how diverse your crew is going to be, how do you manage to establish a favorable environment and make this an asset and not a difficulty? Well, everything Matthias just said is obviously something that we develop, and I think this is something that we share. So I'm not going to dwell on that. I'd like to talk about something else. So first, you need to find the right match. Find the right person, match the right person with the right job. I have one thing which is important for us and which can be a bit difficult when, trying to find the right match, because it takes time to find where the exact position where the person can show all its potential. So we need to accept and take a bit of time. And then we also need to work with people who would sometimes find it difficult to be positioned in other positions than the one that they wanted, because they feel, I'm an expert in this position. Or in diversity situations that we experience with disability, for instance, where you have people who want to make up for their disability and they want to be in one position where they won't succeed. Let me take one clear example. It's just as if on the boat I had somebody in a wheelchair saying, I want to be in the front where you're, working with the sails, where you have lots of waves and it's very hard. And it's just impossible. And I have these people in wheelchairs who asked to be positioned there because they just wanted to make up for their disability. So this is where we need to support our teams to help them be placed in the position in which they will be the best. And this takes me to my third point, focus on the strength. This is something that we keep saying to our teams, especially during the inclusion phase, when we include new recruits, new crew members. We want to remind them that there is some time for adaptation, that we all have our world with different rules, but that we all have disabilities, all kinds of disabilities. And if you start just looking at Matthias or Barbara's weaknesses, you're certain you'll find weaknesses because there is no such thing as a person with no weak points. No way. So if all you're interested in is the weak point of people, which can become tempting, you start thinking, okay, we need to compensate for these weak points. this can happen. So you want to avoid that and focus on the strength, on the strong points. Then you want to make sure that everyone understands that there are different rules for everyone. Doesn't mean that the companies are not strict, but it means that everybody is going to understand the rules in a different way. So there is time that we need to agree, and that it takes everyone's participation to rephrase the rule, because there is often a gap between implicit rules and explicit rules. And, you know, there are implicit rules everywhere, and we all believe that the rule is clear. You know, it's as we keep saying, I told you so. No, we never told him so. We said a word in a couple of seconds, and we never took the time to make sure that this very person, with all his background and all his culture and everything, has understood what you meant in terms of rule. So this is something that we need to do. And another thing which is important when we talk about diversity is a traditional reproduction of, you know, domination patterns with alpha males, 40, 50, and you have this woman coming on board or a person with disability coming on board, and you are the 40-year-old macho man with experience, and quite naturally, you have very good intentions, and you start helping this poor woman or poor disabled person because you want to help. And if you don't pay attention, by helping, you deprive this person, you deny this person of the ability to develop his or her own tools and adapt to his or her position. Of course, you need to be present and support them, but there is a clear difference between supporting and allowing someone developing their own toolkit and what a man would naturally do. So if it's another man, I'm going to behave like, okay, have you found your workstation? And I'm telling you the rules. But if we have this tradition of, I'm going to use this word, but condescension. And if you have good intentions, you know, if you have good intentions, sometimes you can deny a person the ability to develop their own abilities out of true kindness. Okay, so we talked about team inclusion. Maybe we can display a few pictures of Team Jolokia crews. Pierre, maybe you want to make some comments. Well, that's our boat. Just to take you to give you an idea, the mast is 30 meters high. That's a 9-story high building, and the sail is 300 square meters. The one in the front, the back one is slightly smaller, but you can imagine how complex it is to achieve performance with this type of sailing ship or boat. So nothing. How many crew members? Well, on board 12 crew members, but 25 in the team. So everyone trains and practice, and for the races, you have 12 crew members on board. So you see these people living with disabilities. So you see, at that time we had just white people, but as we realized that, we posted our job offers in other places to get applicants from the cultural or national diversity. But what I like on this picture is diversity is not always visible, because we have this obsession for visible diversity. But let's not forget that there is a huge invisible diversity. So you see, that's the team. That's a bit later. That was 2 years ago. You see that we have evolved in terms of diversity. We have Mbaki. She lives in Germany, but she comes from Cameroon. You have Mez. He's in industrial design in can't remember, but near Paris. So this team is more similar to French diversity, and there was no positive discrimination. And that's the whole team. And the day the picture was taken, this was the team. Okay, well, thank you. So that's quite impressive. So you realized, okay, it's a bit complex because we need to have a whole process in place for recruitment, and inclusion is not all that easy to allow people to express their full potential. And it's by adding up these potentials that at the end of the day, we should achieve performance. So Matthias.
I wonder, can you explain, because we spoke about high potential, of course. They have very high, some of autistic persons have very high competencies. So could you give us example? Can you explain why they overperform in some tasks, in some job position? And if we match correctly the position with the competencies, what is the performance?
That's one of the questions I be asked from most of the companies that approach us. So what's the benefit? We mentioned before, we do have some of the geniuses, and they really are shining persons in terms of performance is so obvious that the colleagues get jealous. It's just they pick up things easily. They have a tendency for zero fault in terms of everything is right. I have one of the first persons we could find a matching job was he studied physics and mathematics and was working as a gardener for a couple of years for what we call in Germany €1 job. And we could get a job for him working in a company building robots crawling through pipelines, scanning the pipelines for cracks, for corrosion, whatever. And this is digitalized, but has to be on a visual interpretation on the screen in terms of the computer can find the major cracks, but the fine things you have to watch inch per inch, meter for meter, and make your own assumptions on that. And you have to be good at math and physics to interpret these shots from its ultrasonic pictures. And he was that good in that job that he got a job offer right away. And the funny story behind that is they needed to have a training. It's a license you need to have before you can start the job, because it's quite risky. Explosion of a pipeline causes millions of dollars, plus may cause injury or death. So this is a tricky thing. And he joined that course, and the manager 2 weeks later called me and said, "You know what? That was the best course ever, because this person, without any bias, would question anything that he would not have understood first." So he was so clear on what he was asking that everybody else in the course had 100% result after the test. We usually, or I generalize, I would say, okay, I didn't get that quite clearly, I can read it later, or maybe ask a friend, or forget about it. So he never would have done that. So he was so clear and asking the trainer, the teacher, how does it work, so that everybody at the end of the 2 weeks got 100%, and that was outstanding. And we thought about making a business model out of that, but putting him as the same person in the same course would not work, unfortunately. So, one-time chance.
Thank you. Pierre, j'aimerais que tu puisses nous parler justement de la performance sur le bateau.
Okay, Pierre, I'd like you to tell us about performance on the ship. So the first question is, did you ever win a race? you know, as compared to other ships that do not recruit according to diversity? And second, what gains did you make in terms of safety and security on the board? Did you make any gains as compared to the other crews? Okay, so with regards to performance, right from year one, we managed to be in the first third of all the ships. So the first year, we had to adapt, to discover how this specific world works, and we also had to adapt to the ship, which is a big machine. Year two, and this was a beautiful surprise, we came in the top 3 on one race. And trust me, it struck people on board, but also those outside. And as we're talking about management, what I'm interested in is the crew. And, you know, in a crew, once you've been successful with diversity, the crew understood that everything we were trying to put in place, which might seem cumbersome, long, boring, but when we started being successful, all of a sudden, the team realized, hey, guess what? We're doing something great. Because, yes, on the picture, we don't look like a standard crew, and we came among the top 3, so it means that it works. And being capable of capitalizing on your successes is something very important to set up a team. Now, with regards to your question about safety and security, I have 2 major examples of how what could be regarded as a constraint led to an innovation. The first example is a very simple example. There is this girl, she comes from a mountain region, and she was recruited not for her skills in sailing, because she had none whatsoever. She was a beginner, but she was born in the mountain region, so she knew about mounting and climbing. She was typical, not a typical woman, you stupid, but a typical person from a mountain area. You see, it's impossible not to have bias. What did I tell you? So, she had the typical qualities of a person from a mountain region with lots of abilities to run the extra mile, and she had this understanding of what working as a team is about. But she contributed something we did not expect. These people in the mountains, they have expertise with ropes. This is something we never thought about when we hired her. And she said, well, why do you fold your ropes this way? And she says, why do you do that this way, manually? Why don't you swing the rope behind your head like we do in the mountains? And for us, that's important both in terms of performance and safety, because you know what? There are sails at the end of these ropes, and these ropes can drag you at sea in a couple of seconds. So how fast you bring it back on board is a matter of security and also of performance. So you see, this person, she was a beginner. Some people might think that's going to be a problem. Well, not at all, because this person is going to use her other expertise to contribute something, if you're capable of listening. So it means that you need to be open to all the other environments around you. Second example is the example of Olivier. Olivier is blind, has been blind from birth. So blind people are very good in steering because they do everything from what they feel. But we knew that beforehand. We were not surprised. What came as a very positive surprise is the fact that Olivier made us improve our communication processes even more. You know, on board a ship, you have standardized communication processes, and you need to be loud and clear for your instructions to be heard. And the sea is a rough environment where you get tired, and any oral or verbal pollution is difficult to cope with. And Olivier said, you know what? To me, this world, it only exists through what you say. So you need to be even more clear. You know what? We were so certain we were good at communication. And he says, well, I don't understand anything of what you're saying. So we had to rework on this. And it's the performance of the entire crew that was increased. So from what might appear as a constraint or something that we've not identified, that leads to innovation. That's really interesting because clarifying procedures is something that we can talk about autism, because an autistic person needs very clear instructions, unbiased instructions, and that helps the team improve as a whole because they work with an autistic person.
Absolutely, yeah. We got that feedback from our partners and companies quite often, that through bringing a person from the spectrum into a team, the communication changed a lot, because it needs to be clear expectation setting, do that until then, and not this has to be done. And everybody has an advantage of a clear communication within the team. So the team leads have to change, but the team members as well. And that really came to a better performance for the whole team. Plus then the social aspect, that taking care of a person with some needs gives more meaning even for the job besides the regular daily business.
Merci. Alors, je vais laisser du temps aux questions, peut-être pour conclure.
Okay, we'll have a bit of time for questions. But before we do so, I'd like to share with you some keys to show you why it's important for companies. And I'll share with you the example of BNP Paribas, which I'm most familiar with. People claim that we are a business case for diversity, and McKinsey and other companies like Sodexo have demonstrated that diverse teams or mixed team achieved better performance. So this business case for diversity is something that most people are very familiar with by now. And diversity is also a business case, but from outside the company, if I may, because at the moment, rating agencies are putting pressure on companies for them to demonstrate that they have an inclusive policy, that they do not discriminate. This pressure from scoring or from rating agencies is increasing at the moment, and at the moment there are some deals you can't apply for if you don't get the good rating from these agencies. And then there is pressure from social media and from communication, which is also very important. And this is also business for corporation. There is a genuine risk for image. So even though you can start working on diversity for obvious ethical reasons, there is also it's also a prerequisite. You can't do that. You can't do without it at the moment, just for image purposes. And then there is a war for talent going on. At the moment, there is an increasing number of companies, there is an increasing number of young people who want to set up their own business, and it's getting increasingly difficult for corporations to recruit the best in class. So you want to broaden your scope, and if you always recruit from the same schools, it becomes difficult to hire the best talents. And this has to do with performance as well. And not forgetting that having diverse staff also helps improving products and be more inclusive for our clients. Let me mention just one example, quite rare, but which does exist. We have this staff member. She was a woman, but she became a man. It took time. And this staff member has a bank account at BNP Paribas. And last week, she wrote me an email because she had the official gender change. So we changed everything for her, her badge, her name in the email. But there are things which are more difficult, you know, like the number 1 or 2 tag number for social security number, 1 for guys and 2 for women. And now she's 2. So we're all very happy. And then we said, okay, now that she is actually a she, we need to change the bank account. And she wrote to us, and she's a staff member and she's a client, and we're moving forward, and she helps us. And there are many similar examples. Accessibility for disabled people, making all our website accessible to everyone. It's not just, you know, disabled people in a wheelchair, but we have senior clients, elderly clients, and they can't easily see what they need to do on our websites. They can't hear very well when they have sound instructions. All these things are things that we need to take into account on a daily basis, both for our staff and for our customers. It's not something additional that we need to do. It's a requirement in order to be more performant. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, because these were fascinating examples, and I do hope we'll have plenty of questions about your 2 cases and your 2 situations. So we have roving mics, and we'll ask the people in the room to use mics.
Je vais me lever, ce sera plus simple. Bonsoir.
So I'll stand up. I'm Nicholas Karazievich. I'm working with NK Consulting. I'm blind. I'm not sailing. I might apply. At the beginning of this conference, I was very much surprised by what I heard, and especially at the end, when you talk about performance and when you talk about how it can benefit the company and also outside the company. I work in sensorial innovation, so I try and enhance the value of companies' products, enhance customers' experience by using other senses than vision. And at the moment, what is difficult, beyond recruitment, legal obligations, and administrative cumbersome factors, I have 2 questions about recruitment and inclusion. The solution for many recruiters, you were talking about bias and prejudices, and the idea was to have interviews in a dark room with no light, not to be prejudiced about diversity, even have board meetings in the dark so that these CEOs would be aware of these diversity issues. But my question is very simple. In order to go one step further, the theme of the World Forum is companies, what for? Well, the true question is all about innovation and thinking that a person with disability or a person from a different country, from a different culture, can't they bring innovation about, even beyond companies? Okay, we're talking about corporations, so I'll step in if I may. So yes, this is what we're trying to achieve. Talking about autism, when I talk about a consultancy firm with consultants who suffer autism, they are not regarded as officially disabled person, I just introduce professional to other professionals. And all I say is, just look at the expertise, look at their resume, and look at whether they can contribute something you don't have in your company. And that's the way it goes. And what I sell them is overperformance with regards to what they traditionally have. And it's the only way you can, well, in my mind, it's the only way to bring down these biases and prejudices we have. So we can connect that to innovation, performance, and we can do that with everything that has to do with diversity, not just with disability. So I fully agree with you. Hello. Another question to businesses. I'm sorry, it's going to raise a controversy here. So I heard your conclusions, the interest, etc. I know that BNP has signed many charters and is committed. I also know that on 22 of September, you were sentenced for harassment and discrimination with legal penalties and financial penalties. And the week after, in the press, I saw many communication operations. So my question is, what are you going to do in the company to demonstrate that diversity is a source of performance, knowing that it's the person who was sentenced, not the moral entity, the legal entity, not the individual person who was sentenced? Okay, so I'll come back to the signing of charters, the Other Circle Charter that we signed in 2015, and we received thousands and thousands of insulting emails just for that. And there is nothing outstanding in this charter, just guaranteeing an inclusive working environment for LGBT staff, and it led to a revolution with lots of insults from social media. So communicating on diversity, and more specifically on those topics, means taking action. Just signing a charter changes a culture. So we're not talking about communication and talking about the weak impact of communication. I think sometimes you need to communicate, and just communication is enough to change lots of things. And this is what we experienced with the Other Circle Charter for guaranteeing a good working place for LGBT staff. It's also in 2015 that we embarked on the Pride France project. We had networks. Sorry, Mike, no Mikey, no talkie. Sorry. I'm sorry, I'm not focusing on this LGBT criteria about diversity. No, but you mentioned this sentence, penal sentence. So this staff is currently living in the company. The case you're referring to was in 2009. It's not because you sign a charter that everything changes the next day in the company. There is 189,000 of us working in this company. And, you know, all of us, we have our life. And when you join a company, for the first time, you're exposed to diversity because you can't choose the colleagues you're working with, and you live with diverse colleagues. And if you've not been educated beforehand, well, it's the responsibility of the company to make sure that people work together, respect each other, get to know each other so that they can work together. It doesn't mean that you're going to change the personal convictions of 189,000 people, but we need to make sure that it's possible for people to work together. And of course, sometimes we screw up because there is 189,000 of us around. But signing a charter, having a diversity policy, communicating about it, that's a message we send out to our staff. And we tell our staff, if there is anything going on, you let us know. Because this is a company where we won't be blinded, and we have a responsibility to guarantee a good working environment to you. So you have different processes. You can go to your trade unions, you can go to the psychologist. I mean, we have lots of ways to support if anything happens, because all we can do is reduce things, but we will never achieve 0%. And by the way, this Diversity Week is the result of this, is not the outcome of the trial, because it has been on the agenda for more than a year. It's our annual Diversity Week. And of course, the sentence came out, not good. But we still stick to our conviction. We must talk about it, we must communicate, we must share, and that's the best way we can move forward. I'd like to add one thing, because what Barbara says is very important to me. I also experience situations in companies where just communicating can lead to resistance. Just giving feedback, over lunch. This can generate resistance, because this is a changing world. Yes, companies are more open. Yes, they have challenges when they recruit people. And yes, and this is why we go towards diversity. It's not just because we have ethical values. Actually, in companies, we don't care. We need to be more diverse. We have to. But to achieve that, we need to change. And it's up to every single one of us to change. And yes, the situation at the moment in companies are a disaster, because when they've graduated, and I'm sorry I'm saying that in this venue, but this is an important matter. Once they've graduated, students have been formatted to reproduce all the biases and societal patterns that they were trained for. And we have to escape this, because this world is changing. And companies are trying not to be lagging behind. They're trying to take down walls. And that's all I have to say. Well, actually, I have a specific question to Matthias. Sorry, can't remember your family name, but that's for you, Matthias.
Sorry?
That's fine.
Okay, thanks. En fait, du coup, j'allais partir en anglais, mais j'ai pas j'ai pas suffisamment de vocabulaire.
I was about to do that in English, but I fear my English is not sufficient. So with regards to autism, you focused on one specific type of autism. Those who have probably the most developed intellectual skills. But does it mean that for other types of autisms you felt will never succeed, it will never work? My question is about other disabilities, actually, because I know a bit about this issue, and I think some autistic disorders are probably more difficult to deal with in a company context.
Absolutely, yeah. So, although we started 12 years ago, still a young company, and we need to gather experience as well. So we choose the easy way and started with the easy ones, the intellectually capable people, mainly with a good education. For education usually is one of the keys to get a decent job in a corporate world. Nevertheless, there are models where more handicapped people from the spectrum can work as waiters, as in bakeries, wherever. Yeah? And not all of them are like where we focus on, science geniuses or into computer sciences. There are many artists, there are many people with different skills. And in these areas, money is lacking. Yeah, so the computer science area is still an area where people are needed, where jobs are offered, where it's comparatively easy to fulfill that position. For others, it's difficult, and it will be, to my experience, to my judgment, it will be necessary to get their social support from state as well. So that cannot be a pure financial model driven by companies. Yeah.
Pardon. On sait également que l'accès aux formations...
We also know that accessing training for this category of population is already difficult with no much support from the state, unfortunately.
Yeah, that probably differs from country to country. That there are countries we are working in, for example, Iceland, they get a lot of support, small community, and the advantage there is that even more challenged people are included in the working life because the community itself is so limited, 300,000 in Reykjavik, so they need to take chance or using these people. Yeah, we live in a luxury world here, and we can obviously we can leave these people out of the working place, and that is I'm sorry for our community here, and in Germany it's even worse probably. 30 years ago when I started to work, these people were naturally talents in computer science. My first mentor, he would not look into my eyes, he would not join us for lunch, he would walk down the aisle with a finger on the wall, staring at the curb. Today I have a name for that. I wouldn't say it's enough for a medical diagnosis, but he definitely was somewhere on the spectrum. These people disappeared in the last 30 years in these companies. And now we have to change our mindset to bring them back, because these people are standing for innovation. Yeah? These nerds, what we call them easily, yeah? Think different, think out of the box, where we do trainings to make us think out of the box. They do it by themselves and stuff like that. So that's it's funny. We streamlined ourselves, our community, our companies that much that we now suffer on it, and we are having a hard time going back to a natural mix.
J'ajouterais aussi que parfois il faut être tactique et qu'on est tout.
And I'd like to say that sometimes you need to be tactical, and we try and break down stereotypes and biases, and very often the bias linked to disability is not linked to competency. So it's helpful to have these geniuses, because then you can work on bias, show what bias is, and then show that you should forget about bias and look at the competency and the skills. So it's a small part of the population, but it's very positive to start, you know, it's the win-win. It's the low-fruit type of strategy.
And bias starts by ourselves, and bias is easily followed by judgment. And as soon as we catch ourselves judging, step back and think about if there's a bias behind it, and that can make a start for your own change.
Hello? Okay. Yeah, I think it works now. So I have a question because I'm a student here actually, and then I was wondering if you work as a company or a foundation, because most of the time a company, they are looking for, I mean, they want to make money, they just want to have some profit and stuff like that. So I was wondering whether you guys work as a company or a foundation or whatever it might be. And then my second question is, how do you approach the different companies? Do you, is it you who go to the company or trying to, or is it the opposite? Like you try to tell some company that we have a kind of, I mean, some people here who have these different abilities, and then they can come to you. So how does it work? And the last question is, how did you made it? The history. Where this good, great, amazing idea come from? Thank you.
So it's all for me? Okay, so there is a foundation behind it who is covering the development in all the countries. We are covering 13 countries, meanwhile, North America, Canada, USA, since 2 years, Australia, and Greater Europe. We do have corporations in some other countries as well. The country setups are a lot different. They apply to the local situations in terms of is there a like a donation culture like in the US, where you easily can get donations for ramping up Dutch companies, yeah? Or do you get subsidies from state, or is it all private organized or financed? So that really differs from country to country. The goal is at least to make a living for the people working in there. Yeah, that would be the main goal. We don't want to get rich. The final goal itself is that we can close down Specialisten sooner or later, because everybody understood that these people are a value on the market and hire them themselves, and we are not needed anymore. So that's the difference to other companies who want to expand. We will expand, and I'm not afraid that we're going to have to close down soon, but that would be the goal. That was first, second, not sure. Third was, sorry.
Where, I mean, like, how did you come to create this wonderful company?
Okay, thank you. Mentioned before, it was the idea from Torkel Sonne, a Danish guy who has a son from the spectrum, and had this idea that the talents of his son does not match with the experience he was engaged in autism groups, that many unemployed people from the spectrum. So he developed the idea to do something for people from the spectrum to bring them to the first labor market. And most of us working with the company, some are related. So I do have a son from the spectrum as well. So, and my wife is half Danish, so I got to know Torkel Sonne, and I started the business in Germany. So there needs to be some relation to that topic, either professional-wise or personal-wise.
Moi, j'ai une question pour Pierre. Je suis ici. Est-ce que tu as
Hello,
déjà...
a question to Pierre. Have you ever registered ships in charity races, telling them that if they would win, the money would go to a charity? So that would help you understand if purpose has an impact. No, we've not done that so far, because there is a word that comes to my mind. It's the word empathy. Okay, I just wanted to use the word empathy, because gain, enhancement of what you do, is not just for the people on board your ship, but also for other people. No, I understood what you meant. But then we also have time limits. What we need to do at the moment is to demonstrate performance as compared to other professionals who are supposed to be at their top level. If we start having another objective, the message is no longer going to be as clear. So of course it could be a decision. I'm not saying no, but our strategy at the moment is to demonstrate performance just like any other crew. All the rest, studying duplication ability, that's done in a second step. And I think it's important we separate the two. Okay, clear answer. Second question, statistics you had an A/B test, and you said that for each skill, you had 2 assessors assessing the skill. If you have one scoring it high and the other one scoring it low, wouldn't it be easier to have 3 people assessing? Well, we average out the scores. Sometimes we have opposite scores, so we end up with the average. But you know what? If we had 3, you'd say we'd need 4, and it never ends. But zero discrimination, let's not fool ourselves, we'll never get there. That's impossible. Okay, but on your 2 assessors, one gives 0, the other one gives 10. And if you had 3, don't you think it would be better? Okay, come on board. Join us. Help us out for the next recruitment round. That's our last question, guys. Hello, I'm Isabelle Guerquinole. I manage a company fighting against stereotypes, bias, and discrimination. And you're talking about diversity, but with a prerequisite, which is that of performance. I mean, this is what comes out from what you said. And of course, it's very sexy for companies, very attractive. But back to fundamentals. Diversity means making sure that everyone has the same opportunities. So, of course, I understand what you're saying. And of course, there is added value for certain specific skills. But don't you think this is dangerous? Because why should they overperform? Why should they? Okay, we chose this because that's the topic of our round table, diversity and performance. But I also believe that in France, diversity is a matter of ethics and diversity. It's not exactly the same thing in English-speaking countries that speak about the business case for diversity. We tried that 2 years ago, and trust me, it's not well accepted in France because in France we're more focused on ethics. But I think this does not exclude the other. Diversity is a fact in a company because all people are different and they all need to express their potentiality. But beyond performance, just being yourself in a company means expressing your potentialities and working better together. And we all know that if you feel better in your company, you will express better potentialities. So I think it's quite ethical talking about performance when you can express your difference and express your best potential. Okay? If you can see performance in diversity, then there is no more problem anymore. One of the immediate problem with diversity biases and prejudices is to say biodiversity means lack of performance. So, de facto, you start excluding people. And the ethical problem also comes from these biases we have about performance. So it's by dealing with performance that we can also address the ethical aspects. But yes, you're right. There is a danger. We sort out the problem, but the danger is that diversity becomes equal to performance. So that's a danger. As for Joloquien, that was a decision that we made because we want to promote diversity in a global way. So we clearly chose the diversity and performance axis for various reasons, one of them being the fact that we saw where ethical fights are standing at the moment. Like any fight, when there is a change, ethical fights lead to extreme resistance. And this is what we see in our societies with progressive people. Even politicians talk about progress, to talk about their movement. And you see highly conservative people So there is these tensions as during any period of change. So the true question is, yes, we need to continue fighting, support this fight, and maybe using the performance argument, maybe it helps avoiding generating these resistances, because today, if we go till the end of the road, I don't know who wins in the end, and I'm not the only one, I guess, being concerned as to who's going to win in the end.
Complete sensitive area, and you're right. It's hard to put it all on the performance. What we do as well, because not all of our clients are geniuses. They are just regular workforce. But still having a person employed that so far lived on welfare and now pays taxes and social security and whatever makes a major difference. And under CSR, that's a value add to the company and to our society as well.
Très bien, ben, merci beaucoup. J'espère que ça vous aura apporté des informations.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed this session.